I chose to do my research on the exceptional learner simply because I found in my previous years I've had gifted learners, but the majority of my students have been struggling learners, and so it's just been a challenge for me trying to find the needs of my gifted learners when most of my attention or my instruction is usually geared towards my struggling learners. So that's the reason why I decided to do my research on this. The historical information. Historically, the field of gifted education has a long history in the United States dating back over 100 years. And this could go further simply because this is when they started to collect evidence and research on the gifted learner. Plucker and Callahan add that in the 1970s, the federal government identified the gifted learners as falling under 6 distinct areas, including general intellectual ability, specific academic aptitude, creative or productive thinking, leadership ability, and visual and performing arts. According to Kulangaloing Wood, historically, the profile of a gifted individual was a white upper class or middle class student who was well behaved in the classroom, belonged to a traditional family that was involved and financially secure, and was a member of various honor societies and student groups. Presently, there are a few ways to identify and admit talented students of different diversities into a gifted program. For instance, DINISCO states that students in poverty and rural areas often show giftedness in leadership, creativity, and problem solving in their activities within their community. Peters describes the 3 steps into identifying a gifted learner. First, a child is recognized as being unchallenged in the classroom. Second, the child is assessed to ensure that he or she is truly gifted and not just considered to be bright. And then finally, the child is provided interventions within the gifted program. Additionally, testing assessments such as the IQ test have been used to determine gifted eligibility. The table below shows how a student can fall between being moderate to profoundly gifted. Basically, you have to score 130 to be identified as gifted. Students who take the COGET and score a composite score at the 90th percentile or higher and an Iowa test of basic skills score at the 95th percentile or higher also qualify for gifted services. However, testing is not the sole method used to qualify student for gifted eligibility, although the scores are beginning indicators of gifted students. For example, I know in my school, I know that our gifted teacher does use the test scores to determine the eligibility, since we do have few students who meet other requirements, but not through testing. Moving on, the characteristics of a gifted learner. According to Harris and Videgor, gifted students mature through social and with neural networks, impacting both visual and sound representation in both hemispheres of the brain. Research throughout the years has identified several characteristics among gifted students. Thompson states that gifted students tend to prefer abstract themes and concepts and tend to be open and flexible and also value logical analysis and objectivity. Thompson adds that findings suggest that regular classroom instruction, which often emphasizes high auditory memory skills, structure, fact learning, and peer collaboration, may not be ideal for some gifted learners who are highly tactual, conceptual, open, flexible, and often independent learners. Here's a chart that kind of helped me identify or differentiate between a bright child versus a gifted learner. For example, the bright child knows answers versus a gifted learner asks questions. A bright child is interested versus a gifted learner is highly curious. So I'm just give you a couple seconds to kind of skim through that to kind of see how a gifted learner truly is. Previous literacy interventions. Many interventions have been applied among gifted students either by the classroom teacher or the gifted education teacher. The interventions have been placed to help foster critical thinking skills and can be differentiated to meet the needs of all learners. According to Kenny, the interventions that have been employed include inquiry-based learning, literature discussions, and critical literacy. One literacy program or intervention that's been implemented is the use of inquiry-based learning. Kenny states that inquiry-based learning is initiated with an essential question, which then leads students to work through a process to explore and address the real-world problem articulated by the question. Students select a topic of interest to research. They formulate questions about the topic, gather, sift, and synthesize information, and finally do something with it. The last component is often the most difficult aspect for many students, but it's what distinguishes inquiry-based projects from the typical school research projects that we do at school. Inquiry involves more than reporting on a topic. It requires students to move beyond those basic comprehension questions of who, what, where, when questions so often form the basis of classroom research project. They are pushed to expand their understandings by creating new connections. Since one major characteristic of gifted students is creativity, interventions and strategies have been developed to help students foster their creativity. Smitney composed a list of interventions in which teachers allow choice in choosing materials and assignments that will help gifted students thrive on creativity. Some of those interventions could include selecting a more difficult short story, and students retell the story's events from the point of view of different characters. Allowing students to do independent research by using a variety of text, websites, and blogs is also one way to give them choice. Instead of assigning a specific project, students can evolve their divergent thinking by composing a poem, a collage, or a podcast. So what are some of the results from these previous literacy interventions? Although the interventions mentioned in the previous slides proved to be effective when applied with gifted students, research across the field proves that the teachers who implement their strategies are the ones who play a major role in the effectiveness of the strategies. For example, Kim reveals that both divergent and critical thinking skills are widely taught and practiced in gifted talents and programs, but unfortunately, teachers often act as if the specific content to those activities doesn't matter. Another finding that Callahan noted was that when teachers do differentiate their instruction in the general classroom, the teacher's main focus is on students who are struggling to learn rather than investing more focus on the gifted students. Therefore, the teacher plays a vital role in ensuring that if the strategies are applied effectively, gifted students can receive the proper challenges that they need. Needs not met. Gifted students' needs are not always met for a variety of reasons. For instance, because gifted readers have already acquired the necessary skills to read text on their grade level, most reading textbooks will not meet their needs of meeting challenges. Kim adds that most gifted education programs have the promotion of creativity as one of their goals and include creativity in their screening process. However, a large and often overlooked gap remains between the way gifted education programs treat creatively gifted students and the needs of those students. Exhibiting creativity may help a student in the selection process, and creative thinking activities may be part of the program itself, but the special and important needs of creatively gifted students are neglected. So the result of this gap is creative underachievement by individual students. And as noted earlier, the teacher plays a major role in helping students meet their needs. Finally, the new learning that I gained as I was doing my research was that I came to the realization that some students who are considered gifted can also have learning disabilities. These students are also known as GLD students, an acronym for Gifted Learning Disabilities. This was new learning to me because I was under the misconception that gifted students were intellectuals in all aspects of their cognitive development. However, the research I found suggests that learning disabilities are also present in those children for different reasons. For example, Albert Einstein, who is considered as GLD, had serious problems with language, whereas he showed high interest in space and light and world peace. He worked in physics, a field that deals with abstract entities such as space and energy and visual stimuli such as light. The reason that more gifted individuals with LD and auditory domains have been known as great achievers in history may lie in their giftedness in idealistic and visual domains. And so that concludes my presentation on the gifted learner. Thank you for watching.